Assalamu alaikum and hello to all my students and my listeners. Our next topic is about the third type of suicide, that is anomic suicide. As we all have an idea about the social currents causing different types of suicides like integration and regulation, now the anomic suicide is just because of the lack of regulation or the external constraints upon an individual or group of people. So, what is anomic suicide then? When regulative powers of society are disrupted, anomic suicide is more likely to be happen. Upon an individual, when there is no external constraints are being applied, there are a lot of chances that that person might get into the anomic suicide. Such disruptions are likely to leave individual dissatisfied. When these disruptions, these interruptions, or these external constraints, or these authoritative interferences, or some regulations are being disturbed, the individual may likely to be seen as dissatisfied. Why is it so? Because humans have little control over their passions, which are free to run wild in an insatiable race for gratification. If a person was aiming to achieve some of his goal and due to any certain reason he remained failed to do so, then there are a lot of chances that he or she will get into the anomic suicide. They will get into the anomy, a state of anomy, and likely to be attempt an anomic suicide. Rates of economic suicide are likely to rise whether the nature of disruption is positive, like an economic boom, or negative, like an economic depression. These disruption can either be positive or negative. What Durkheim wanted to say in this kind of phenomena, that disruptions happen due to certain incidents, certain situations, certain circumstances, may either be positive, like an economic boom, like a sudden success, or negative economic depression, like went over of a job. Either type of disruption renders to collectivity temporarily incapable of exercising its authority over individuals. When these disruptions are being happened, individuals have no external authoritative constraint upon themselves. The disruptions render to the collectivity temporarily incapable of exercise authority may not be exercised upon individual then. In a specific schedule we are living our lives, and when these disruptions may happen, we might not be able to exercise the practice those authoritative exercises, those practices. In such changes, people may came across new situations in which old norms no longer exist, but new ones are yet to be developed. When a person is basically get out of those situations, those schedules, those regulation in he or she are regularly to be during their lives, they may will face certain normlessness, certain rootlessness even. And because of the absence of the previous system of the norms and roots, new norms are yet to be developed. Because of it, they will get into the situation of anomy. So these kind of disruptions may unleash the currents of anomy, moods of rootlessness and normlessness, and these currents lead to an increase in the rates of anomic suicide. When a person get out of the regulation, the external constraints in which we are supposed to live our lives, these will unleash the currents of anomy, and in which we actually may face a rootlessness, a normlessness, and ultimately some of the currents of anomy will catch us, and we ultimately will get into an anomic suicide. It may be easy to understand through an example of economic depression, then, according to Durkheim. For example, the closing of a factory because of a depression may lead to loss of a job. It is quite certain when the factory is being closed, there are a lot of employees over there who may will not have that job anymore. So the resulted individual is cut adrift from the regulative effect that both the company and the job may have had. That person may have a very compact schedule, a compact kind of regulation in his life, but after the uh, closure of the factory and leftover of his job, he may will have to face certain ridicules like anomy ultimately, and those currents of anomy may will get himself into the state of commission of anomic suicide, being cut off these structures or others like for example cut off from the family, the religion and state, can leave an individual highly vulnerable to the effects of the currents of economy, because when he has been there at the job, he obviously will be there with the other family members. He will continuously attend the rituals of the religion, and he will have a kind of connection with the state as well. But as soon as he will no more there with the job in the society or the state, then he will have to cut off from these all social institutions. So there is a recent example in the January 2020 when a father in Karachi committed a suicide due to his joblessness. He was jobless from the last previous 6 months, and his children wanted him to get themselves winter clothes, but he was unable to do so. So ultimately, those currents of anomy catch him, and he had committed an anomic suicide. There is an alter situation, maybe as well. A person or a society can experience that is the case of economic boom, in which Durkheim argued that sudden success leads individual away from the traditional structures in which they are embedded. It may be a kind of situation in which a person was deeply integrated in the society or the social structure of the society, where certain traditions, certain norms, certain customs are being followed, but due to a certain due to a sudden success, he might be no more there in that regulative kind of atmosphere or environment. It will lead individual to quit their job, move to a new community, and perhaps even find a new spouse. For example, winning of a lottery, for example, winning of a prize bond. These are some of the certain situation in which a person may will get into these all situation, leaving his job earlier, move to a new community where might be not the people are so much intact with their norms, the ideal culture the society demands from themselves, or he will even may have a new spouse, because he believes so that the previous one may not be identical with the new atmosphere, with the new situations. So all these changes disrupt the regulative effect of extant structures and leave the individual in boom periods vulnerable to economic social currents. When he was attached with the social structure closely, and he was under a certain regulative power, but as soon as he experienced that economic boom, he will be detached from that social structure and will be vulnerable to economic social currents. In such a condition, people's activity is released from regulations, and even their dreams are no longer restraints. He might will be there with certain bad habits after the economic boom. For example, he was not having a kind of habit of smoking or drinking, but after that specific activity, the specific social change in his life, he will get into these bad habits or certain even more immoral activities which was not a part of his life earlier. And his life is or dreams are no more longer restrained. People in an economic boom seems to have limitless prospects, and reality seems valueless by comparison with the dreams of fevered imaginations. So ultimately, what happens? The increase in the rates of economic suicide during periods of deregulation of social life are consistent with Durkheim's view on the pernicious effect of individuals' passions when freed of external constraints. People, when have no external constraints upon their lives, they can do anything, and which ultimately will get themselves into the currents of anomy, when there will be no one around themselves, and they will just have their passions, they will have just their dreams, without any certain emotions, without any certain passions that can accompany them earlier. So people thus freed will become slaves to their passions, and as a result, in Durkheim's view, commit a wide range of destructive acts, including killing themselves. So, in those emotions, in those passions of slavery, of their dreams, they will have certain commissions of destructive acts, like even including killing themselves up. So, this was all about the anomic suicide. Hopefully, you people do understand it. If you people have certain questions, you may ask me freely. Thank you so much.